Welcome to the Inside Out Money Podcast.
Can't even recognize this place. Too many pieces of our past mistakes.
Hi, I'm Maggie, and I believe real change starts from the inside out. So let's work together to improve our money and our lives from the inside out. We will explore all things money and our relationship with it. Join me each week with a rotating set of co-hosts, friends, and interviews. Let's jump in.
It's time, we going round and round and round and round.
Hey, Andrew.
Hey, Maggie.
How are you?
Good.
We are going to talk about ego and humility and how they can have a, positive and negative impact on your money. And I think this is the perfect topic for you personally.
Yeah, this is one that I'm fairly passionate about. I think it's one of those secrets that if you get it right and you help develop this skill, it can really help you succeed in the money game.
Yeah, very much so. And all these topics are, running around the personal finance space in various ways, but this was also a little bit inspired by a recent podcast I listened to from your boy Morgan Housel.
My hero.
Your hero. And it was...
He talks a lot about this.
He does, yeah. But he had a specific one that was named, Let Me Convince You to Save Money. And he talked in that... Well, let's wait. But I just wanted to give the connection to Morgan Housel. And then before I jump into that, let me just welcome everyone. This is the Inside Out Money Podcast. This is a personal finance podcast focused on redefining wealth from the inside out. Every week I speak with a rotating set of co-hosts about a different financial topic to help you improve your financial mindset and tactics. And today we're attacking it from both angles. And we've got co-host Andrew here, and we are going to talk about something that we're calling the humility hack. But it's the idea of how embracing a more humble mindset can lead to better financial success, lasting wealth, and I would argue a more fulfilling life. It's the idea of putting your ego in check for the sake of your money.
Mm-hmm.
That is the hack, by the way, just if you want to cut to the chase. I'll give credit where it's due in the sense of Morgan Housel was talking about what I consider part of this equation on his podcast a couple months ago now, but I just listened to it. And he was really getting into the point about nobody cares. And you've got to, you could attack it from the angle of nobody cares, or you need to not care. And you need to realize that you're not doing things for other people. You're doing things for yourself. And realizing that can save you a lot of money.
Yeah, so much of spending in our modern society is what I refer to as show-off spending.
Yeah.
And it's people are spending money to prove a point, to show how much they have, or it's not spending on their values, it's spending on a perception that they want people to think, right? And what they believe.
And they want to look a certain way and keep up with, what's happening around them and the circles of people they're around.
And I think there are certain categories where this really shows itself. Probably the biggest one is cars.
I was going to say housing and cars.
Yeah, they go they're pretty darn close.
Yeah.
Although, I think that when it comes to housing, a lot of people make decisions around housing around kids and school districts and things like that.
But they don't go buy the cheapest house in the school district often, which is my point.
Yes.
So it's not just that. I mean, they're thinking about what it looks like from the outside, and they're, not everybody. Some people have already made this humility hack. So Morgan Housel talks about this a lot in this recent episode.
And also not only just this episode, he dedicates a lot of this topic to in his books as well.
Very true.
And he goes into lots of detail in the books about this concept.
Yeah. And so does Ryan Holiday, who I'm a big fan of. So he is an author. He wrote The Daily Stoic, and he's written a book called Ego is the Enemy, which we'll give some quotes from throughout this podcast. But it's really I like the way that they both come at it, because Ryan Holiday comes at it from the sort of philosophical view of like the ego and how it can hinder us versus help us, and how to think about it, and how to think about it, less from a financial angle, right? And then Morgan Housel puts more of a financial spin on it as he's talking about it. And so I just love the idea of thinking about these really mindset hacks that can keep us just as happy and even happier long term, because we're able to reach a stronger level of independence and wealth, honestly, over time, like independence and contentment, but through building stronger financial wealth and health. So let's talk about what the term ego even means. Like, when you hear ego, Andrew, like, I consider you, by the way, a very low ego person, which is why I like this topic with you. I'm not saying the other co-hosts have big egos, by the way.
Yeah, it's hard to describe. I feel like outside of financial things, I think this also applies to the workplace as well, and titles, and how people get so wrapped up in their, where they are in the pecking order, right? And
titles, comparison to others.
Correct. Yes. Right. And so I think it's it's that comparison piece, right? And it's the how what am I doing? Am I doing something for myself, or am I doing something to appease somebody else, or to show off something to other people? Right.
Yeah. Is it ego driven? Right. So I'll give some kind of quotes from others, and some of these quotes are from a mix from Ryan Holiday and Morgan Housel, but he describes ego as the main enemy of successful, great, and ambitious people. It is an internal force that destroys great empires and great companies and brilliant artists, and tears apart relationships and partners. Right? Ego prevents us from learning. It holds us back. It makes us overreach. It's sometimes defined as a conscious separation from reality, from other people, from objective truth, and from how things actually happened. It can be incredibly toxic. Some say like a cancer. It could be the opposite of gravity in sense of it's pulling us down towards the ground, right? Instead of towards where we want to get to. And I think it's a lot easier to point out and see ego in other people than it is to even recognize it within ourselves.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think if you look at leaders across the spectrum, whether it's corporate, whether it's political leaders, people who they want to be in the limelight. They want to take credit for the wins. They believe that everything is about themselves. And the best leaders that I've come across have all been the opposite of that. It's those people are more interested in the success of others, and it's not all about themselves. It's about others, and that's kind of the essence of it, to avoid becoming wrapped up in yourself, that you lose sight of what you're trying to do for other people.
Yeah. And again, it's easier to spot that in other people than ourselves, right? Like I can think of times at work where I could point to someone and say like, that is, highly ego-driven behavior, and that doesn't do well long term. Particularly in the corporate environment I worked in. Perhaps in some cultures it might, but in general, it's not a good look. So even if you have it, you need to find a way to like put it in check. And we all have some ego to some extent, right? Nobody can say they're ego-less, I don't think.
Yeah, it's
more of, I think, like many things, being able to recognize it and name it and appreciate it, right? And I say appreciate it as in like really like be able to look at it in a very introspective way and be thoughtful about, what you're seeing happening and why and what you might want to do differently. The other thing is some people I don't think respond well to the specific term ego. And I often think of the, you could put the term ego around it. You can attack things from lots of different angles, right? But we once did a podcast on Friends on Fire called it was called something like Nobody Cares, Stop Caring What Other People Think. That's a different angle of like the same beast, I think, in many ways, the same spirit.
Yeah, I think it's just one of these topics that it's hard to define, but it's easy to see.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Or spot.
Yeah.
Right.
Again, not always easy to spot in ourselves, though.
No, and it's easy to spot in others.
I mean, we'll talk about, some real life examples, but I sometimes myself have to ask, why am I doing this? And what are the real reasons behind why I want this? And okay, so the idea of ego can manifest in all sorts of different stages, particularly certain life stages. And as a result can really harm our finances because ultimately it can cost us money if we aren't able to recognize and at times I almost don't want to say stop, but I do want to say stop, but check our ego, if you will, and realize that, as the book is titled, ego is the enemy. And, one is as you're sort of working your way up, in your career, in your life, as you're growing up, I think about, back to my early 20s and decisions I made that were ego driven. I could definitely go back and look at some. And I don't think I was nearly as in touch with it as I am today even. But our ego throughout that phase tells us that we already know everything, right? I'm dealing with teenagers. I got a front row seat to people acting like they know more than I do and don't want to listen to adults. And I remember when I was that age, right? I thought I knew more than people that were older than me. And I acted accordingly at times. And looking back, I'm like, I did not know nearly what I know now. And I believe I don't know as much now as somebody twice my age, right? And so, that ego can prevent us from accepting the right position. It can get in our head about doing certain types of work we think is below us or something. It can make us focus on, what we quote deserve. And it can stop you from focusing. I think when you talked about career stuff, and we did a whole episode on this recently, Andrew, but if you're driven particularly early in your life, I'm going to go with in your, early to mid 20s, even early 30s sometimes. If you're driven by ego, you're not putting the work in, right? You're not doing things for the right reason, and you're not doing things in a way that are going to get you, that next promotion and more money and whatever it might be. And I just think it can be a huge limiter. People see it, you're doing the wrong things at work if you're doing them from a place of ego. And then also other people see it. And that's a whole nother, both of those things work against you in different ways, I believe. Mm-hmm. I think about the first car I bought getting out of college.
What was the first car you bought?
Well, the first car was when I was 16 and my parents pretty much gave it to me.
First car you bought yourself?
First car I bought
college.
Myself was right out of college. I had this great job at Home Depot. I remember I was going to be making $46,500 a year. It was twice as much as I'd expected to be making because I was previously going to go work for an ad agency. And I think ego and a little bit of naivete and just not being experienced enough financially to know better than this drove me to go buy I financed a brand new Honda Accord with a spoiler and a sunroof and all the fixins, Andrew.
I thought you were going to drop something even more luxurious than the Honda Accord. Honda Accord,
practical.
you're kind of, my first one was, the only new car that I've ever bought was my first one, and it will likely be my last one.
Yeah.
Was my Subaru Outback that I got in Vermont. And I bought that brand new. I think it was about $18,000. I financed it. And that was the last car. That's the last new car I will ever buy. The last finance car I ever bought. Yeah.
Okay. So then you're getting a little bit older. You're kind of in you're starting to get success in your career. You're starting to make more money. You're in this, achieving phase. And I think that's where ego can become even more dangerous. Because you're around, I think this is where you've got the keeping up with the Joneses, and we'll talk more about that concept, but I think about my work, and as I was starting to succeed more and more at work, I was around more and more people at my now peer group level that were spending so much. And they were moving to nicer neighborhoods. They were moving to bigger houses. They were putting pools in. They drove fancier cars. And at this point in time, I was probably still driving my Honda Accord, or I might have moved my Prius, which I bought after that. But those were still very, I don't know, basic's the wrong word, but like reasonable vehicles compared to
utilitarian.
Yes, they were not, they were both new. I bought the Prius new too.
Oh, wow.
I know. Yeah. But actually at the time, I will say you couldn't buy a lot of used Priuses. They were fairly new and people really liked them and there just wasn't a big used market for them. But anyways, loved my Prius. You get this sense of like, you're starting to achieve more and more. There's a sense of like entitlement, of arrogance. It makes us think, again, we deserve this stuff. We worked hard for it. And it's not to say you don't deserve lots of things, right? And you don't, if for your, it makes sense for certain things in your life for you to have someone cleaning your home or you're getting massages or things that keep up your sanity and mental health and support in your life is one thing. It's really checking on like how many of those things are coming from a place of ego. And if no one ever, I love the question. I feel like Liz brought this up when we were talking about something recently on like, if the question was, would you buy that thing if nobody was ever going to see it?
Yes. I love
right.
that.
So would you buy that car if no one ever saw it? If when you rolled up.
Also, the other way to think about it is if you bought it and you were forced to take the logo off after the purchase, would you still buy it?
That's a good question.
Right. And, cars, people can see, like they know what the style is, right? So it's hard to do that. But lots of other purchases, right? How much is being spent just because of a logo?
Yeah.
Right?
I actually spent some extra money recently to cover up the logo on my car. To like Greg bought one of those like vinyl cup, whatever, like blacked it out basically. So it was like the opposite of ego.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, I love that phrasing is, would you still buy it if no one ever saw it?
Yeah. Like, would you have that fancy house if you could never invite anyone over to it? And if you could never,
Or would you go on the fancy vacation if you couldn't post it on Instagram?
I was just at like adult pool party over the weekend. It was lots of fun. It was like an adult having a birthday party and it was great. It was fun. And everybody was sort of like talking about their summer vacations and where they went. And I don't think in like an ego, like in a conversational way, but like, what if I couldn't say where I went? Would I still have gone there? Right. I think I would have. I'm not sure if my kids would have. I like to think they would, but I don't know. It's a good question for me to ask them.
But those are good litmus tests, right? For checking yourself to say where is my what is the driver of the purchase? Yeah. Right? Is the driver of the purchase because I simply love it, or is the driver of the purchase because I want to make sure other people know that I've purchased it?
Yes. Okay, and the last life stage we're going to talk about related to kind of how ego can come to life or manifest is when you're dealing with some level of adversity or difficulty, right? You've got a setback in life. And if you've let your ego drive you on the way up, right, as you're in this aspirational and achieving phase, you're super screwed during the setbacks because you're not prepared to, it's like hard for me to even verbalize at times, but like it's really hard to take a step back at that point and realize like, oh, we've lost someone's lost their job, something happened financially, and I've got to like adjust my lifestyle. If you've already been doing things, first off, if you hadn't if you've been able to sort of check your ego, you likely have been better off financially in terms of you've been able to save more. You got a higher savings rate, which we'll talk about later. But also you've become accustomed to, I'd say, like living with less and just being a little bit more. Well,
there's a direct correlation between ego and lifestyle inflation, right? The two go hand in hand. And so if you are able to hold back or, I love check your ego at the door, then you can manage that lifestyle inflation. And like you said, the setbacks are easier to manage because you haven't been at that place. Yeah. You were in the hotel business, Maggie, for a long time, right? And I like hotels, and there's all these different levels of hotels, right? And
we had we ran the gamut. A lot of the big companies have stuff from budget friendly to high end luxury.
you go from the, Holiday Inn Express all the way up to, what was your premium? The Intercontinental, right?
Intercontinental,
ISG?
and then we actually had some that were even above that as I was
Right.
leaving. But yeah,
Or even you look at the Marriott properties. That's an easy one. You've got the Courtyard, and you go up to the Ritz Carlton, and it's interesting the differences between those properties and the experiences you have. Ultimately, both of them are serving a similar purpose, but
they all provide you a bed and a bathroom, and a shower.
most, right?
Within our portfolio, they all did. Yeah.
Right. And then what is it that, you're paying $1,000 a night to stay at the Ritz, or you're paying $100 a night, $200 a night to stay at the Courtyard, and what is the value difference between those two, and how much of that is because am I really getting the full value personally for the Ritz, or am I doing it for external reasons?
Well, this is similar to like our housing discussion, right? Like you could be buying the fancier, nicer house because it's in the school district you're trying to get into. And so sometimes I've stayed in nice hotels because that's the location I want to be in. And that's all that is available with that sort of, like on that body of water, or like whatever that thing is. And there's been other times where like that's less important, right? And so ultimately ego does have a direct impact on our money habits, right? So we've given examples of things, and I'm sure you can think of your own, of just where spending is driven by ego and you're making decisions, not for the, quote, right reasons. And there's so much research that, shows beyond a certain level of, income and expenses, or beyond a certain level of basic needs being met and a certain spending level, which provides, basic comfort in life, that you aren't necessarily going to be any more happy. And the argument related to that too is beyond that basic level of comfort, it is mostly a reflection of ego as you are spending, more above that particular level. And also I thought something Morgan Housel said was really interesting. He said, when most people say that they want to be a millionaire, what they actually mean is they want to spend $1 million. But the idea of true wealth is money that you do not spend and maybe will never spend. Right, it's hidden, and it's what gives you independence, and it's very much what's given me independence.
Same here.
Right, I would actually argue, and maybe we can save this point for later, but like I would argue, the FIRE lifestyle and the pursuit of FIRE is an exercise in trying to kind of kill your ego.
Yeah.
Right.
No, there are lots of ways to achieve financial independence, and having a big salary that will definitely help you, and not spending money, keeping your expenses low, and keeping lifestyle inflation in check. But ultimately, probably the biggest hack is simply not caring what others think. And if you can do that, the easiest way to keep your lifestyle in check and to prevent lifestyle inflation is to have this mindset shift that you don't care what others think.
Yeah. And just to be very real and vulnerable here, and I'll use myself as an example, it's not always the first natural response to not care what other people think. Right? It is like a muscle, like, it's something you have to grow and build.
I think it's absolutely a skill.
Yeah.
It's absolutely a skill.
It's a skill you've got to build.
You have to build, you have to develop
practice. Yeah. Because I think about when I had my list of like all the things I was kind of afraid of related to FIRE and related to like pulling the trigger. And some of them were related to, I achieved this level professionally and I'm sort of leaving at the peak, and I could have continued on, I think, very successfully at that level and perhaps even more senior levels. And I, had a title, I had a team, I had, these various things. And walking away from that, I don't, it is very like ego stripping, right? Of just, I used to sometimes think, oh, what if I meet somebody and they're like, and it happens all the time, right? Like every day, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I don't I don't really do anything now, but that's not my answer normally. It is like,
You see this topic come up on the Reddit forums constantly.
Yeah.
It's probably the number one topic in the fire communities, is that people question, well, what do I tell people at cocktail parties?
Yeah.
Like, how do I respond to that? And so much of it is ego.
Yeah.
Are you willing to say, I'm retired?
Yeah.
And
which I would argue actually like sounds even more baller than like saying you have a job. But again, yes, but it pulls away, like a lot of the things that you defined your identity by slowly get stripped away, and then it's just you, right? And that is the spirit of like, if you could be good with yourself and recognize that, like, who cares about some random person at a cocktail party and what they ask, you know, like it doesn't matter what, you know, you say to them. So anyways, we'll move on from that point. I think another interesting thing is we talk about like the keeping up with the Joneses, which everybody's heard that term, and lifestyle inflation and everything is related to that. But there's also the sort of add on to that, which I would say is like keeping up with the Kardashians, right? Because right now the Joneses are not who anyone wants to keep up with, right? Because of social media, and I don't want to say just because of social media, but I think social media is a huge influence.
It's a big part of it.
Yeah, social media, and then also just reality TV and all these things. There's these like hyper inflated expectations of wealth and success. And I know my kids see it. I know their peers see it. I look at, you know, what they expect and ask for, even versus what I expected and asked for when I was a teen. And it didn't even like cross my mind to ask for certain types of cars when I was a kid. I was happy to get any car.
You've talked about your kids and their G-Wagon comments.
Yeah,
right?
they know about cars where I'm like, how do you know what this is? Like, and I mean, Morgan Housel actually gives this example of his 8-year-old son's definition of rich was having a private island and a Gulf Stream and 7 Lamborghinis, and that was influenced by Mr. Beast, right? That's far beyond what any parents would consider like normal wealth. And that, you know, it's not helpful for future generations' happiness to become tied to things like that. And so again, this is where, you know, the more we can find an antidote to this, which we'll talk about, right? Which is kind of what we're talking about with the humility hack, right? The opposite of, I don't want to say the opposite of ego, but I think the opposite of ego is humility. And the more you can put in place a humility hack, I think the more you can really focus on building like confidence and discipline and trying to pull away ego-driven activities and choices and decisions in your life.
Yeah, I agree. So one thing we can talk about is a little bit, how do you fight back? How do you keep this ego in check? And I think a lot of it is driven by confidence, and
which is different than ego.
Correct. Yes. And I think if you are confident in the decisions you're making and the things that you're purchasing, and that you are, if you approach life with a level of confidence, it can really help you push back against those egotistical driven decisions. And I think that's the thing that I've tried to focus on in my life over decades of trying to, and it's not easy, right? I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that it's easy to and you come across these decisions, like we've talked about, like there are some obviously big ones, cars and houses, right? But there are lots of daily decisions that can be ego driven.
And they add up.
And they do.
The big ones are big, but all the little ones. When we just did the first half of your expense review, and like I got a lot of little stuff that's adding up. Some of it's ego driven, some of it's not. Right. But I kind of want to, like, you know, I'm in a place right now of wanting to check my own decisions and why I'm making them and who I'm doing it for and why. Right.
And how successful would Starbucks be if they only gave blank paper cups, right? And no one knew that you were buying Starbucks every single day.
Yeah.
And I think so much of this is tied to brands and Maggie, you and I have been in marketing for a long time, and we know the power of brands. And so many part of it is just is fighting back against that feeling of, hey, I want to have this label, right? I want to be able to, and it's, that's just clothing, right? But it goes across everything throughout our entire society.
Yeah.
So as far as, hey, I want to be, shopping at this store, or I want to be buying this brand, and it's not necessarily because the quality is better. And in some instances, absolutely, the quality is better. But in so many instances that it's all marketing and driven by the brands.
Yeah, that is a great point.
Or take Lululemon, for example, right? I mean, how many people would be wearing Lululemon if they didn't have any label on it?
Yeah.
And you didn't.
It's tricky because this is...
Because you would probably say you love your Lululemon pants.
Well, I'm going to make a comparison to Starbucks and Lululemon, because I'd put them tied to some of my decisions. I'd put them in a similar category. And I will caveat this by saying, if I was in debt and if I was not able to afford these things without making, if it was like, I'm going to be able to buy these things or send my kids to college, like I wouldn't be, I would make different decisions because that's in line with my priorities in life and my financial values. But I'm at the point where I can afford those things without them derailing my other financial goals. But here's my thing on Starbucks and Lululemon. So both of them offer a consistent product and style. And so I'm going to, like Starbucks, for example, I know a couple drinks that I like there, and I go to local coffee shops all the time, and I'll get a mocha, and I'm like, it's just not the same. It's like too sweet, not sweet enough, whatever. There's a consistency to knowing what I'm going to get, a consistency and a convenience. But like, I don't really drink caffeine that often, but like Starbucks has a nitro, which I really like. It's sort of like a draft coffee. So does QT. So if I'm just going to get that, I'll go to QT all day long because it tastes the same. But I can't get a mocha soy latte that's delicious at QT. They don't make it, right? And so that's one of the things I like. And then about Lululemon, like, I don't care if you take the logo off it. They're doing the curation for me, and I like the style, and it fits well, and they've got good customer service. I just returned a shirt there that had some armpit holes in it. When and if I can find, quote, dupes that offer the same comfort and quality, I own some, right? But like, I don't want to go looking for that stuff, right? So if so to me it is, otherwise I'm going to have to try harder to find workout clothes when I need them. And I've found something there that works for me. And I've had a pair of leggings from them for like 10 years, right? So I don't, anyways, that's my case on them of like.
It's a good point. I respect your point.
I put a caveat on for the same reason you're buying like name brand cycling stuff,
correct.
Right? You're not going like off brand for some of that stuff. Now, I'm not doing anything as serious as you are from a competition level, but I take it all back to, again, it's not negatively hindering my financial goals in life. I'm able to afford it without, it. Now, arguably, I could put the money towards something else. Yeah. I think that level of self-awareness and knowing ourselves is really important, though, right? And being able to actually like look at it and say, is there an alternative to this sports bra from Lululemon that's just as good and just as comfortable and just, easily in front of me, that's, a third of the price? Like, yeah, if that's put in front of me, like, hit me up, guys, if you know of some, because I might look at them. No one even sees my sports bras. They're on under my shirt, I think along the same lines of, the antidote being confidence and humility, there are some very specific mindsets and strategies that can help you build financial humility, right? And can help you sort of, like you said, this is a skill and you've got to, focus on it and grow it and build some habits, and also do some test and learn and realize, what matters to you and what doesn't, all of that. One is the idea of just being a perpetual student, right? So this idea of always recognizing that you have more to learn and that we don't know it all, right? We talked about that some earlier, but I just think staying in a mindset of I'm constantly
continuous
learning new
improvement.
things. Yeah. And I don't know it all, and people know more than me, and I can always, do better, I think is incredibly important, even from a financial standpoint. I mean, I get messages from people all the time where we got something wrong on the podcast, or we didn't, mostly we get messages where we didn't mention something. And I'll say, we're never going to holistically cover every single possible angle on every single topic. But sometimes there's things where I'm not as aware of a particular thing, and I learn new stuff all the time, and not just in the finance space, but in all aspects of my life. Would you keep cycling if you weren't winning so much right now? If you weren't on the podium?
Certainly the racing and the desire to compete drives the training to a level where I'm at. I think I would certainly back down the training if I was not racing at the elite level that I am.
So if you were, because you're number one on most of the podiums where you're competing. If you were does number 5 get to stand on the podium? Or is it just 1, 2? Okay.
Yeah.
If you were number 6,
right,
consistently, would you keep going? Would you would that give you the push to?
I mean, I enjoy the competitiveness,
Okay.
and so there are events. I got 6th at the Criterium Nationals a couple of weeks ago, and I still enjoy the competitiveness of racing, and it's not my best event, but I still enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
And certainly the health benefits and how I feel every day are important. Am I going to go out and do a 5-hour ride in 100 degrees like I did today?
If you
Probably
weren't
not.
trained, yeah. The reason I was asking is because there's also the concept of embracing the process, not just the outcome. And I even hear people say this around fire. Some people get so focused on a particular goal that they aren't enjoying the journey.
You're not enjoying the
They're
journey.
so
yeah.
focused on a
And
destination.
I think that I would be guilty as charged on that. Right.
From a fire standpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, from your spending, you mean you're
Right.
so
Yes. Yeah.
But I think you're slowly getting better.
I don't know. We'll see in a couple hours when we do our expense review.
The thing is though, you're so good at the humility hack, right? It's almost like that's the competition for you,
Right.
But yeah, just the idea of, I think this is not a new concept, but of not just being focused on outcomes and there's,
Yeah. The process is, you embrace the process and enjoy the journey along the way to hit the end goal.
yeah. And it's very aligned with a lot of Stoic philosophy too, but just being very focused on the present and what's in front of you and doing things well and right, controlling what you can, which are your own actions, right? What you can do to improve, and not focused on what everybody else is doing, which starts to really fuel the ego when you're comparing yourself to others. And I think the idea of not comparing yourself to other people in itself is incredibly powerful and will save you money, earn you money.
Comparison is the thief of joy.
It is, yes. I believe we have a episode that's titled that.
We do?
We'll put it in the show notes. Yeah.
Was who was Liz that?
It was with Erica.
Okay.
Yes, it is episode 57, titled "Comparison is the Thief of Joy. Stop comparing yourself to others," and it was with Erica. It was a year ago, though. It's so long ago. And another thing around doing something very actionable to improve your financial humility is invest in being prepared and don't focus on trying to predict things. Nobody knows what the market's going to do next. Nobody knows when or if a recession's going to hit, right? People forecast all sorts of crap, right? We've done episodes on this. But most of the worst events that we've seen in, our lifetime's history, nobody saw them coming until they were here, right? And yeah, there's people who might have predicted,
COVID's probably the best example
yeah.
of it.
But I think the idea of, you think about like how California prepares for earthquakes, like they can't predict them, but they know they're going to happen. So we can't predict times of financial instability or stress or adversity on our finances, but we know they're going to happen, right? So when I was even prepping for fire, I had all sorts of fears of different things that could happen. I just had a dream the other day, actually, that I had cancer and was told by the doctor my insurance was useless and I needed $1.2 million to cure it, which was a very specific number, by the way. And I was like trying to face, like, am I willing to pay do I have 1.2? Can I pay this to, I didn't even focus on like, why is insurance not covering this? Anyways, that's what dreams are for. But just the idea of, we know there will be earthquakes. We don't know when, we don't know how bad, but we know they will happen. And so we should always be prepared for them. And so we can always be prepared for unexpected financial mishaps, right? From a market downturn to losing a job to, a tree falling on our car or something crazy or, odd or unexpected, or unexpected illness that costs a lot of money and is beyond insurance or something like that. And so we should be prepared for them, right? We have tons of episodes where we talk about, emergency funds and stuff like that. But it's the sort of thing that, again, like we know it's going to happen. And so we should really focus on preparedness and not getting our heads spun around by the fact that we can't predict what's going to happen, which none of us can do.
Right. And then the ultimate hack for preparedness is dollar cost averaging, right?
Yeah. Which I don't think I fully appreciated, like how big of a fan Morgan Housel is of dollar cost averaging and how much he talks about it. I kind of forgot until I heard him talking about it again.
Yeah, it's like the core of his financial strategy.
Yeah. And even his parents and him talking about like how they invested. And dollar cost averaging, Andrew, like give the, one sentence.
You continually invest into the market regardless of whether it's up or down. You then don't care whether it goes up or down. You're always continually investing in the market.
Yeah. So it's if I know I have about $5,000 a year in my budget to invest, I'm putting, 400 and something in every month, automated, consistent. And I'm not stressed about timing it because we can't time the market. And it's a set it and forget it power move, I would argue, because it takes, it's the best approach. I don't know a better way to say it. We have entire episodes on that. We can put some links in the show notes to it. And then, related to that is the idea that, building financial wealth and health is a long-term endurance game, right? It is not a short-term gain situation. And ego and other things would lead you to believe that there's ways to get rich quick and that there's ways to, and I'm not saying that hasn't ever happened to anybody, but most of the people who have built wealth know that it is a matter of endurance, right? It is just getting those average returns for an above average period of time. And over time, that is going to grow thanks to the value of, compound interest and compound growth. And you are going to build wealth, right? And I think there's the example of like Warren Buffett and, 99% of his net worth was accumulated after his 60th birthday, which was due to consistent investing for, decades leading up to them. And, there's all sorts of other examples of people who had pretty average jobs. There's a famous one of like a janitor, Ronald Reed, who saved like $8 million by investing, small amounts of money and letting it grow for, 6-7 decades. And that's a choice, right? Like being patient and having the endurance to realize I'd say like discipline and patience to dollar cost average, to focus on earning more, spending less, investing the difference, right? Like that is really what builds wealth over time. And I think too much ego will push you towards other things and schemes that aren't necessarily as legitimate and as, tried and true, right? And that you think it's real easy to get sold on like a get rich quick scheme.
Yeah. The turtle wins the race here.
Yeah. Andrew, I think we can close this up with a few reminders of how to build that financial humility that we've been talking about.
Yeah. So focusing on spending and the reasons behind the spending, and making sure you're spending intentionally and not spending for outward facing reasons.
And I think, the concept of enough, right? Like Erica and I did an episode on what is enough, which is actually one of our top 10 episodes, I believe. And just recognizing what actually will make you happy versus what society is telling you will make you happy, right? I think is incredibly important. And on the flip side, also on the saving side, right? I think the power of having a high savings rate, also recognizing like you don't need a reason to save, right? You're saving for all those things that you can't specifically predict, but that you can prepare for is incredibly important. And I think sometimes people think they need a reason to save, but your reason to save is that you want more control over your time in the future. And you don't really need to know exactly what that looks like. You just want to have more options and flexibility. And I sometimes like, if you want to like reframe a concept, like if you recognize in yourself that you are a very ego-driven person, flip that and like push your ego towards like, I want to have the biggest savings rate, right? I want to like use that, use something that could be the enemy, but like use it for good, right? I used to do this when I was stressed out at work. I would just like open my brokerage account or like open my net worth chart and be like, okay, I got options. I could walk out of here if I need to. And then I think another specific one, because it is just such a big spending category and a big choice that most people are making in their life, is your housing decision, right? And how you can make a housing decision driven from humility and not ego can be it is like the biggest thing you'll ever spend the most money on in your life. So it's one of the biggest things to sort of check against your ego, I would say.
Yeah. And thinking about what, the neighborhoods that you're going to look at, and the thinking, I say historically, you talk to realtors, you talk to various people. I've heard this advice given numerous times, is you want to buy the cheapest house in the most expensive neighborhood. And while that can be at times good, I think there are a lot of downsides to that approach. And the downside to that approach is that if you have the cheapest house in the neighborhood, you are automatically surrounding yourself then with people who have lifestyles that are higher than yours. And the fastest way to increase your lifestyle is to put yourself in a position around people who have a higher lifestyle than you do. And so I actually think the opposite is the right approach, where you buy the most expensive house in the neighborhood so that you are already at the top of the lifestyle charts, and
there's nowhere to go.
There's nowhere to go, and I think that the people that you associate with and your environment plays such a role in all of this. And while social media has, I'd say, quote, even the playing field in terms of like, everyone is comparing it to everybody else, your most immediate comparisons are still important, and drive a lot of your behaviors. And so I think that if not buying a house in the most expensive zip code can be helpful to limit the lifestyle inflation and check your ego. And it kind of comes back to, I've always believed that the correlation between ego and lifestyle inflation is they're highly correlated.
Yeah. And look, housing's a tricky one because there's all sorts of strategies, right? I think renting for various reasons over the years has like gotten a bad rap as not the best financial investment. I don't think that's true at all. Sometimes the best thing for someone to do is to rent, right? Again, depending on their long-term goals, how long they plan on staying in a market, et cetera. But I agree with, the spirit of, I often think housing is a lifestyle decision that you've made, right? Because you want to be in a certain neighborhood, you want to be in a certain school district, et cetera, or you like a certain community. Like I grew up in the community I live in now. I really like it. There's less expensive areas I could live in Atlanta, but I
proximity to a job.
Yeah.
right?
Yes, you're right. It could be a big
In
one.
Atlanta is
Yeah.
pretty much
Or
the
just not
driving
having
factor.
a terrible commute, right?
Right.
Could be your goal. It's interesting what you say about having like the most expensive house in the neighborhood because there's nowhere else to, aspire to be. But, that's probably not realistic for everybody. So I have probably a like middle of the road house in my neighborhood. And from the outside, less than middle because it's been remodeled on the inside and looks pretty basic on the outside, which is kind of what I go for, right? Like I want to look unassuming. And I'm like half joking, but I kind of like it. But it's a good exercise in humility even of recognizing like I've over the years been in a position where I could upgrade my house. I could spend more. We considered doing a bigger remodel project this year. And I had some like really in-depth conversations with Greg about it and eventually realized I would have been doing it for the wrong reasons. Right. And I had to really look inward and be honest with myself and be realistic about our lifestyle and how often we would use it and, what the benefits would be to us. And there was a tiny part of me that saw other people doing things like this and thought, well, I can afford to do this. Why wouldn't I? Mm-hmm. But then I was like, but I don't need it. And it's just going to create more expenses and more upkeep and, all of these other things that come with it. So I think in the end, we hope you have taken away a message that getting to some level of, financial success is not just about the numbers. It really is about nurturing the right mindset and how you think about things, right? Which again, this is why this podcast is called Inside Out Money, right?
It's always been about the behaviors.
It's always about getting the inside right. And the spirit of the humility hack isn't that you shouldn't have confidence in things, right? But it is about, real confidence, self-awareness, and a willingness to learn and adapt and really look at what you're doing and why you're doing. And remember that, money is a tool. It's, the end goal is not to get rich, but to use the tool of money to have a more fulfilling life. And a lot of the things that create real happiness have nothing to do with money, right? It comes with strong relationships and building a level of empathy and even, pulling your ego away can create a lot of happiness.
All of the above.
So yeah, I hope this discussion has helped you all tame your ego to some extent and really just figure out your own definition of enough on your own terms. And yeah, we appreciate you listening. One of the reasons I like reviews on the podcast, it's a little ego driven, Andrew. Mm-hmm. I mean, it does help people find the podcast, but sometimes you have to question, well, why do I want this? And how much, ego would push me to push the podcast in certain directions that aren't necessarily in line with what makes it most enjoyable and fitting into my lifestyle right now,
I haven't looked at the review count lately.
It's 258. Not that I've looked recently, but that's what it was. I'm just kidding. I have looked recently and it's at 258. But it's, it actually is important from a, just, helping other people find it. And I'm like, look, if we are going to put the time and energy into something, we like it to be something that can reach more people. But quite honestly, I don't want it to reach too many people because that comes with it a whole bigger sense of managing things and responding. You know what I mean? I actually kind of like having a small and mighty podcast.
Yeah.
Is that the right term for it?
Mm-hmm.
A humble little podcast. So anyways, we appreciate you spending some time with this humble little podcast. And if you have enjoyed this episode, you're welcome to give us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We always appreciate it.
We also encourage you to share this episode with a friend or family member to encourage ongoing discussions about money. You can also subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have thoughts or questions, we'd love to hear from you, and you can leave a voicemail or text us at 404-981-3370 or hit us up on Instagram.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Maggie.
Bye.
Bye.
We're going round and round.